Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMolder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And this week, we're going to tackle topics like when our toxicity comes out, when our friends won't accept our sexuality, and showing our literal scars. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners or anything of the sort. We're just two people who decided to do a podcast because we have opinions about people and the things that people should be doing.
Yep, absolutely. A plethora of them, which I'm told is a trait of being a Gemini, but I don't really know.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, this is all to say, please take our advice as you see fit. We are just here to offer our humble musings, hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs on the incredibly rewarding, but mostly confusing experience that is love. Sam, welcome to episode 199.
Oh, we should plan something.
It has not been planned. If you see something on our social medias, it has been planned after this recording. Episode 199. Next week, 200 episodes of Just Break Up. Can you believe?
I can't. That's wild. That's so many episodes.
Yeah. We'll talk about it next week. That'll be our little, what is it? A centennial?
Yeah, bicentennial.
Yeah, a bi icon. Dumb. Okay, but let's check in on that next week. This week's check-in topic is...
It comes from a letter writer whose name is Anonymous, whose pronouns are she, her,
Love
who's
that.
writing from the void. So basically, Anonymous asks us, what is the thing, or what are things that I should be looking for me to know that I'm in love? Like, what are the characteristics? What are the criteria? How am I supposed to know if I'm in love with someone? And the question is things have, some of it has been like, maybe I thought I was in love, but actually I was just obsessed with that person. Or does love really look like stability / comfort, or is that settling for things? Just what's the right mix of things to know that you're in love with someone and not just obsessed with them or just comfortable?
Yeah, I want to play a game. Let's answer this question. Okay. Wrong answers only.
Yeah.
I've seen that floating around on Twitter, I think. Wrong answers only first, and then we'll take a crack at it after that. So wrong answers only. What makes you know you're in love, Sam?
They give you a drawer in their bathroom where you can put your stuff.
Honestly, that's deeply meaningful to me, but I know it's such a low bar. It's literally a fraction of a piece of furniture.
Yep. Yep. Just an acknowledgement that you spend a lot of time there, but not so much that they would actually give you more space, but just one little drawer. Be yep, you can keep your products in there.
Yeah. Wrong answers only. I know I am in love when I go grocery shopping with someone. Get to kiss in the gluten aisle, you know what I mean?
Wrong answers only. You know you're in love with them when you're really in love with their dog.
Oh my God, that or their family members. Ooh. That has for sure happened to me.
It's I don't love you, I just love your mom.
Yes, exactly. But it's not sustainable. Okay, let's see. Wrong answers only. I'm in love with you when our sex is really good.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate confusing thing.
Very
ever.
confusing.
Yeah.
Very confusing.
Because your body's this is love.
This is great.
Or no, your genitals are this is love. And you're no, it's not.
I promise it's not. Your genitals are still guess what? I'm going to flood your body with hormones, though, to make you think you're in love.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks. Cool. Let's see. Any more wrong answers? I don't know. They're in a band. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to a more serious answer. Sam, when have you historically known that you loved someone?
I think like it's hard to know for sure. I really identify with the letter writer asking this question because it is like, yeah, I don't know. Like sometimes I feel like I love somebody like the first time I sleep with them. And like sometimes it's like, no, like 7 months after dating. And it's hard to parse through all of the different emotions that come with like dating someone new, meeting new people, like that. The connection, like the immediate connection that you can feel with some people. And also like so much of what we've been taught about love is actually like really toxic. Like it's like, oh, I know that I love them because they do so much shitty stuff to me and I still want to be with them, as if that's like somehow a marker of like the intensity of your love, as opposed to like.
We can end the episode right there. That's it. That's the smartest thing we're going to say all day. I was drawn to this letter, this check-in question too, specifically because of what the letter writer posed of like, I think I was in love in high school, but like, was that just obsession or crush or lust or whatnot? And like, I could list a couple things about like the way somebody I love makes me feel, but I'd rather pose the idea that like, just like we can evolve, so can our love. And that, did I love my high school boyfriend? Abso-fucking-lutely, to the best of my ability and understanding of love at that time. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Does that love hold a candle to the love that I'm capable of now, or the love that I want for my life, or that I ask my spouse to give me? No, because I have grown and evolved my perspective. Just like we always say, you're doing the best that you can with the knowledge and ability that you can at that time. We love with the knowledge and ability that we can at that time. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's like a hard, if you came to our podcast looking for like a checklist on how to know that you're in love with someone, like Cosmo articles, like 27 reasons why he's the one or whatever, that's not really our vibe. Although I can list like 27 reasons, like, why this person's cool or like why you might love them in this moment. But I'm not sure if there's like a handbook that we can pass on.
And I do think like we've talked about this before. Okay, actually, sorry. I don't know. 7 thoughts just went through my mind and now I'm organizing them in real time like a robot. So what I'll say first is I think that there's like a narrative around love that it is somehow like finite, right? Like you only have so much in you. So if you say I love you to the wrong person, that means that somehow you've like diminished the amount of love that you're capable of. And I don't think that's true. I think that there's like a lot of love to go around. I remember like this was like when I was in church, when I was in high school, there was this big conversation that was happening around me of how the word love is too used. People use it in ways that they shouldn't be using it. So, thinking about when you say, I love my, it's probably going to be wife, given the type of churching that I was in. Right. The idea of if I also say I love pizza, I'm somehow diminishing the love that I have for my wife because I'm using the same word to describe two very different feelings. And I like that always stuck with me, and this idea of this sort of like finite idea, or that somehow my love of pizza would diminish my love for my wife because I'm using the same word. And I do think that that's something that at least was like very deeply ingrained with me, that if I give up too much love, or if I say love when I meant it, but it isn't actually true, right? It doesn't match the like criteria of love. I've somehow diminished future loves because I've said it to somebody who didn't deserve it. And like you said, like, that's such a weird thing to be thinking because my definition of love has changed significantly over the course of my life and will continue to change over the course of my life too, right? Because love is not necessarily a feeling. Love is about action. Love is about doing the things to support and love and take care of the people around us who we care about deeply and feel taken care of by other people as well, like that reciprocal thing. So I'm less concerned about like whether or not people are saying I love you to each other, and more concerned about like how are people treating each other in the presence of that love. And so like love for me right now might look like, I just broke my arm. So like love for me right now might look like Peter helping me tie my shoes, or like tape a paper bag or a plastic bag to my hand so that I can take a shower. Whereas yesterday or before I broke my arm on Saturday, right?
Than paper.
Right? Is like my love looked different. What love looked like or felt like to me was different. So it is an evolving thing. And I don't think that anyone's diminished by thinking that they're in love and then 5 years later looking back and being like, maybe that wasn't love. Maybe that was something different, because what does it matter?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I love that we're like totally musing on this past thing and not actually answering the letter writer's question at all. But that's what we feel called to answer.
Right.
I want to try to answer the direct question about like, how do I know when I loved someone? But if I look back, I think I was just trying to follow a feeling. And I think I was trying to follow joy, and whether that was wholly love or authentically love, I don't really know, because it felt like that in the moment. And maybe that's what's important, right? Is just allowing yourself to give and receive love, knowing that you're worthy of it, that you deserve it, and trying to trust those inner whispers, trust those instincts, and as Sam said, focus on how this person makes you feel. How are they treating you? How do you want to treat them?
Yep.
What's going on energetically behind the words, I love you?
Absolutely. And the reality is that we can all change our minds, right? And like love is not a fixed point in time. It's not a fixed sort of state of being either. And so it's very possible to say, I love you to someone and then have that definition change as time goes on, which is all to say that like knowing this thing, knowing that you're in love isn't as important as how are you engaging in this relationship with somebody, and how are you feeling about how they're taking care of you and how you're taking care of them. And that looks like love. If that looks like love to you, that's great. If it doesn't, that's also great. But you can find a way to navigate through this without putting this other burden on you of yourself, or putting this other burden on yourself to say like, I need to know definitively whether this emotion I'm feeling is love or just comfort or just obsession, right? Like look to the experience of the relationship and less to like, what is the proper word to assign to it?
Right. Yeah, totally. All right, my darling. Check-in question writer. We hope that this helps.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for writing.
Let's get into our letters. Our first letter comes to us from Toxic Man, whose pronouns are he, him, who is writing to us from The Truman Show. To start off, I'd like to say I really appreciate you two. I tried to seek therapy a year ago following the story I'm about to tell you, and tried 2 separate therapists. Neither seemed to work for me. They either didn't seem to really understand me, didn't seem compassionate, and or weren't completely professional, such as falling asleep as I spoke. I cannot get over that.
I would die.
I can't. I would die. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm laughing at the ridiculousness of it, but that's so wildly unprofessional. But also that therapist is a human, and I'm sure they had a long night or something. I don't know.
Who knows?
There's no justifying that. Okay. Anyway. I found your podcast after these fails, and you two have helped me tremendously. I wish I could find a therapist like one of you to sit with, but it seems harder than it should be. They should make a Match.com for therapists that fit you, LOL. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is thank you. Actually, we just got a shout-out letter from somebody who told us that there's like a Tinder for therapy called Alma, ALMA, and the website is helloalma.com. The letter writer said that it isn't for every state, but they sent it so that like I could check it out because I'm still looking for a new therapist. So smart. It's out there.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it looks like they work with insurance too to help you know like which therapists take which insurance as well. So that can help save money if you have access to insurance.
Sweet. Okay, anyway, going back to the letter. I'm in my late 20s. My last relationship had me questioning myself, my reality, and I'm trying to parse through all this to heal away my toxic traits and grow. I don't want to take any of this to a new relationship, and I haven't started one since due to this fear. I'm a constant overthinker, and based on your podcast, I believe I have an anxious attachment style. I dated a woman for about a year. After a couple months, we agreed to be exclusive. She told me she thought I was the one and that she was in love. I was hesitant to say in love because of how hurt I got in my previous relationship. At about 7 months in, I told her that I was ready to say that I was in love. However, a week later, I found out that she was sending nudes to somebody else a couple weeks prior. There were also many messages from men asking her to meet up and sometimes exclusively asking for sex. She never said yes, but also she never said no. She would just give an excuse to them. Her reasoning for all of this was poor, and her main excuse was that this was before I told her I was in love. Through tears, I argued that we were exclusive, that we still said, I love you all the time. I showed her my love constantly, and that not saying I was, quote, in love shouldn't have given her reason to do anything. She said she didn't have sex with anyone, so she kept that promise of being exclusive, that it didn't matter if she used the actual word no, since she didn't meet up with any of them, and said that the nudes were a mistake. She kept bringing up that now I said that I was, quote, in love, that things would be different. I gave her a second chance because the love just felt so strong when we were actually together, and the physical connection was the best I've ever felt. See, fucking good sex lies to you. Cannot overstate that more.
It's true.
Enough, I mean. However, I had never dealt with cheating or having to rebuild trust, and it was so hard for me. It didn't help that she kept being super loving and communicative for a couple weeks and then shut down and was cold for a week. It also didn't help that I kept catching her in inconsistent stories, lies, gaslighting me multiple times. It was never anything huge enough for me to break things off, and some things were just past lies that I caught later on. But the sheer number of times that I caught her keeping things from me or lying was chewing up what was left of the trust. Every lie that I caught, she would instantly take the pure angry defense and it would start an argument. Then, once everything calmed down, she would be super loving and try to build up trust again. I asked her multiple times if she was sure I was enough for her, or if she would be happier in an open type relationship. And she would always reassure me that I was her one and that she wanted nobody else, but her actions didn't always show this. This all destroyed me. I was losing myself in it, becoming super depressed, questioning reality, crying, not sleeping, having stomach pains daily, and I was even suicidal at one point. She set up for us to share locations to help, but I think it ended up making things worse. I'd constantly check her location, her snap score, get anxious if she didn't reply with a certain amount of time, etc. I was finding myself becoming obsessed. Whenever she was on the phone, I'd constantly be looking for who she was talking to. Sometimes when she was asleep, I'd sneak looks at her phone, and sometimes I'd find conversations that went beyond friendly, such as other guys she'd just met asking her to add them on Snap, send snaps of herself, and then telling her how pretty she was after she sent them. She would also regularly get calls from her most recent ex who liked to reminisce about stories from when they were together, and they still said I love you at the end of their calls. She found no issues with any of that. I'd been fine with partners talking to their exes in the past, but this seemed to cross a line. When they were apart, I'd get so in my head, and if she was out with friends, I'd ask for a snap to prove who she was with. I'd tell myself that I know these actions are bad/toxic, but that it was a part of me rebuilding trust, so I made it acceptable at the time. None of this seemed to be me, though. I told myself it was worth this torment, even though deep in my heart, I knew it wasn't. I just thought that once I build this trust back, it would all be good again. I was just on the downslope of this roller coaster, and I would soon be back at the top of the next slope. And honestly, after a while, I began to get that trust back, but I think it was too late. I pushed her away, and I think she was done at this point. I spent a month trying to give her space and show her how I trusted her, but after that month, she broke my trust again. She said she was meeting her boss, but ended up not responding the entire day, and with me seeing her location, she had a day full of hiking, a fancy restaurant. going to a movie, and some other very odd things. Due to me being hurt, I didn't talk to her for a few days. And then when I did, she admitted she met up with a guy. I told her that I couldn't do it anymore, and we ended it. I don't know if she was entirely untrustworthy and unfaithful the entire time, or if she planned to give it her all at one point and be faithful, but that I pushed her into not caring anymore. I guess I'll never know. But I do know that I showcased many toxic qualities and did many things wrong. I handled building trust back horribly. I was controlling, questioning, crossed boundaries, and became obsessed at points. At first, I completely blamed her actions and told myself none of that was me. And if I was with a person that I could trust, that I wouldn't have had any of those toxic qualities. I've been in relationships before where I hadn't. However, as I've tried to heal, I realized that it wasn't that simple. Even if that wasn't me before, that doesn't mean I can't take these traits to other relationships. I found myself talking to girls and checking to see if they've been active on social media during the times that they haven't responded, checking Snap locations to see if they have them on, etc., just as pure reflexes and driving myself crazy. When a friend goes somewhere for the weekend and his girlfriend doesn't want to go but then stays home, I get anxiety and want to ask, seems suspicious that she wants to stay home. Are you afraid of her meeting up with someone while you're gone? It's such an unhealthy way of thinking, and I haven't actually said any of those thoughts to anyone, but the point is that the trust issues and my obsessions are now sticking with me from the scars of this relationship. I'm finding it so hard to trust anyone with just simple things. Because of this, I've stopped all dating until I can feel positive that I'm not going to bring these toxic traits forward. I'm not sure how to work through these issues and begin to trust again. I want to detoxify, love that word. I want to detoxify and begin to get out of my head a bit, to stop overthinking and stop my toxic reflexes. Any advice that you have about this would be immensely helpful. Also, any advice about finding a good therapist that fits you would be nice too. I love and appreciate you both. Thank you. Thank you so much, my darling toxic man, for writing to us. Sam, I gotta go in on a personal story related to this letter.
Great.
I thought maybe you could start first, since I'm going to talk for 48 minutes after you say the first. I just feel like, you know, I just read the whole letter. I should give you a chance to talk.
Yeah. Well, Toxic Man, thank you for writing to us. And I'm really sorry that this relationship didn't work out. And I'm really sorry that you are looking back at the way that you behaved and finding things that you're not super proud of, and that you're bringing some of that shame into this this new iteration of your life, and that what I will say is that I really appreciate that you are noticing when it's happening still, right? And sort of checking yourself when you have those impulses to say oh, I'm having that thought again of, if she's not there, that means she's cheating, or I'm doing that thing again where I am checking people's Snap locations or seeing if they're on social media, and recognizing those patterns that are coming up for you and saying this isn't helping me. Right? Because that's literally the first step, and often a very important step for us to notice when those toxic behaviors are coming up. And part of what we can do in the work is not to just totally detoxify ourselves, right? Get rid of any sort of toxicity. But part of it is noticing when those things are coming up and then having a plan for when it happens. Right. So it's not just about saying I'm never going to be jealous again, or I'm never going to have the impulse to check someone's Snap story again, or whatever it is. But recognizing yep, this is a thing that's familiar. I have noticed this before. And here are the things that I know to try to help me to keep me from doing that thing that I know isn't actually going to help me. Right. So the next step for you is what are the things that are going to help you in that situation? Is it breathing? Is it talking to someone? Is it reminding yourself of something? What are the things that are going to be helpful for you to try and change that sort of pattern of thinking that you might be on?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so thrilled to answer this letter because I'm about to deeply humble myself.
Great.
So why I'm excited to answer this letter is because I have such a similar lived experience, toxic man. And I Yeah. Okay. Story time. So, I had an ex, who I've joked about on this show infinitely. No, what's the word? Infinitesimal. What's that word? A billion times. I've joked about this ex a billion times on this show. This was the ex that like dumped me right before we started this podcast. He cheated on me more than once. He was like a compulsive liar, and I like continually returned to him because I loved him, I think. Mm-hmm. Our check-in topic.
Right.
Yeah. And but so here's the thing, story time. He cheated on me. I don't even remember like the timeline of it all right now, but he cheated on me and we were long distance. And the way that he started to like, we established so that I could somehow like toxically rebuild my trust with a untrustworthy person was he would send me pictures like a selfie at night because we lived in different time zones and I would go to bed before him because he worked like a late bartending shift. Mm-hmm. And that was like a way for me to know that like he went home by himself and he was like thinking of me.
Sure.
And honestly, like half of me still understands. No, all of me, toxic man, all of me understands why I wanted that. All of me understands why asking for proof of safety, proof of commitment, proof of trustworthiness is understandable. I know why I wanted that. And also, I see why and exactly how I got obsessive over it. I got like compulsively, I got cruel over it. Like I definitely became what I talk about on this show in so many instances where this person could not do enough to make me trust him again. And yet I had him on the hook to show me that he was trustworthy. Like I wanted it to work so badly that I was really willing to like trudge through a ton of toxic sludge to make it work, you know? And ultimately, we were both being really toxic, just like it sounds like you and your partner were. And since then, I have had the privilege of unpacking a lot of that toxicity on this show and in my own life and in my current partnership. You know, when you host a relationship advice podcast directly after a relationship in which you were arguably perhaps the most toxic you've been in your entire life.
Sure. Uh-huh.
It's kind of a trip to sort of like reflect on your past behavior while trying to like give holistic good advice to strangers. And that has led me to really, I don't know, feel guilty about the ways that I was trying to control this ex, feel guilty about how my pain showed up. And it's really asked me how unhappy I was in that situation and how stressed I was all the time. Like I was so fucking stressed out, trying to figure out if I could trust this human being with my heart and my life and my effort, you know, and it just made me, it forced me to sort of analyze what in me got that way, right? Mm-hmm. What about me contributed to that circumstance? And it sounds like you're doing the same thing, Toxic Man. And so I just want to share a couple sort of random thoughts. One, I've said this before, but it is so much easier to trust somebody who's trustworthy. You don't need to check their fucking Snap locations. You don't feel the urge to look at their text messages. When somebody is living the way that they are saying that they are living, when they are in collaboration with you, when you have shared relationship goals and visions, like, I don't know, when they're not being toxic, you know, like, your ex created an environment in which you absolutely could not be healthy. Right? The healthiest thing you could have done in that situation is to say, this isn't good enough for me. I deserve better. I'm going to respectfully bow out. But guess what? Our hearts will rarely ever empower us to do that, because we want to make our love and our pain worth it. We want to like see it through, because why else would we be suffering? Why else would the universe and this person we love hurt us so much? Mm-hmm. But being with my wife has been such a healing relationship for so many reasons, because she's just trustworthy. I don't feel afraid. I'm a fucking hella anxiously attached person. And while my anxious attachment style comes up in our relationship regularly, I get my needs met and affirmed. And we talk through all of my insecurities and my anxiety instead of having it have to be met in unhealthy ways. So that's the first thought. The second thought is, I want you to forgive yourself for turning to these toxic traits because you were grasping for a sense of safety, and you were grasping for a sense of control in an uncontrollable world. You were trying to have your needs met. And that's all we're doing as human beings. We're always just trying to get our needs met. And whether we do that in a healthy or unhealthy way, that is what we are always doing. And do you want to carry those traits on into your next relationship? No, you don't. And the first fucking step is acknowledging that. You're like 30 steps in, right? I have no fear that you're this broken, toxic person, because if you are broken and toxic, I'm broken and toxic, right? Mm-hmm. If you're broken and toxic and you can't, have a good relationship, then, well, fuck me. Fuck my drag, right? Anyway, I know this is kind of all over the place, but I just like feel so kindred with you. The last thing I want to say is like, I didn't go into, even though I was deeply ashamed of my behavior in my last relationship, I didn't go into my relationship with my wife, which directly followed that one, without those toxic traits. We all have toxic potential,
for
right?
Sure.
Put us in what's the phrase, like a boiling pot, and we're all gonna boil over. I don't know.
I love that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
You made up your
own.
Keep
that on a t-shirt. Yeah. A pressure cooker. There we go. Put us in a pressure cooker. Whatever. We're all capable of toxicity, because toxicity is the fastest route to getting our needs met, right? I'm in pain, so
we've been taught that it's the
yes,
fastest
that's what
route.
I'm saying. Yeah.
But actually,
it's
it
a
often
lie. That's
doesn't
a lie.
get us our needs met, for sure.
Right. And yeah, anyway, so this is all to say, I didn't go into my relationship with my wife free of that. I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm healed and now I'm worthy of a healthy relationship. No.
Yep.
I went into that relationship with the same fears, with the same triggers, with the same toxic past and toxic behavior under my belt. Like that behavior was so well known to me. And still I was able to basically do what you're doing in this letter. Articulate to myself, to my soul, that was unsustainable and it was something I didn't want, and that my wounds and my needs were worth addressing. Like if I felt anxious, instead of like going and looking at Willow's phone, I validated my needs enough to say, hey, I'm feeling insecure. I don't want to feel this way anymore. How can we work together so that this isn't like this anymore? And it was a lot of internal work on my behalf, but I would be lying if I didn't say my wife didn't affirm me, didn't help me put away some of these fears. Yep. Like I said, trustworthy people are easy to trust. Yeah, maybe I'll just like tap out for a while, because I feel like that was all over the place and plenty for you to respond to.
No, I think all of that was super helpful. And I think, I agree that like if I were in this situation, I would probably behave pretty poorly too, right? Because I think that the only solution that would have
Right.
prevented me from behaving poorly would have been to leave the situation. And that can be really challenging when you really love the person. And when you feel very connected to them and you're thinking like, oh my God, I put this much work into it. So like now it's got to be
Right.
worth it, which are all like very normal things to be thinking and feeling, even if they're not super supportive of us in our relationship and our mental health. But like,
Right.
and here's the thing is like, you were in a really stressful situation. You were in a situation that didn't feel like it was actually trying to build trust so much as like just placate you into recognizing or to like feeling like there was trust there when actually there really wasn't. And that's a really challenging position to be in. And so often we judge ourselves based on the ways we react poorly to stress, right? Like, and we think that that is somehow the most true or authentic part of us. Like, oh, I did that bad thing when I was really stressed out. So that must be the monster inside me that I know is there and it's out now.
Yes.
And that is my validation that I'm secretly a monster that is just really good at pretending like I'm not, right?
Yes.
And that is not true, right? The reality is that you're a human who is put into a really stressful situation. You're a human that has things that have led you to believe particular things about yourself and other people. And those things are coming out in weird ways when you're in a situation that isn't super healthy. And yes, there is always room for us to grow, to find new ways of supporting ourselves in those times of stress that sort of mitigate some of that bad behavior that might come out. But you're not a monster disguised as a human, because in this relationship, you revealed a lot of toxicity about yourself, right? Like you're just a human who is in a situation with another human, and neither of you is communicating well with each other. And there was a lot of trust that was destroyed and not rebuilt in a healthy or productive way. And like, yeah, of course, this stuff came out because like, what an unhealthy and unsustainable position to be in. And how challenging that is when you love the person, right? When you think like this person could be the one for me and like we just can't make it work. None of that to excuse like bad behavior, right? You know this, obviously, because you wrote in and you said that I don't like the behavior I was exhibiting and I know that it was bad, right? Like,
Exactly.
And I hear and I see that from you. And I agree, like, was not great behavior to be doing. And if we spend a lot of time thinking that that bad behavior is somehow indicative of the person that we are, that it's like somehow core or central to our understanding of ourselves, then we're not doing the work, which is to recognize that that bad behavior can come out. And so what are the ways that we're going to be supporting ourselves in that, which is reminding you, right? Reminding yourself, like, I'm not a bad person and I don't deserve to be treated poorly. Right? Like that's a big thing to be thinking about, because if we don't believe that, then suddenly people are treating us poorly and we're like, yes, I deserve this. And so the only thing I can do is control that person so that they stop doing the thing that they're doing. Right? As opposed to saying like, wait a minute, I don't deserve to be treated like this. This person has been sending nudes and like having sexually explicit conversations, even though we agreed that we were exclusive and we both agreed that this was outside of the bounds of our relationship. And even if we didn't make that agreement, not in any way acknowledging the hurt that this has caused, because I thought that that was agreement, and coming to me and like figuring out what we're going to do going forward, right, in a healthy way. But instead just getting denial, getting defensiveness, getting all of that stuff, right? Like there's just so much in this letter that's like a product of circumstances that I want you to recognize some of that. And what I want you to recognize is having a better barometer of when the circumstances are unsustainable for you, and recognizing that you have the ability and the right to leave those situations rather than try and beat yourself up to say like, I can never have a toxic response again, or like I'm somehow inherently flawed, but instead being like, hey, remember how it felt when that person was really defensive to me and didn't acknowledge my feelings and pretended like nothing wrong when there was clearly something wrong? That was bad. That hurt me in ways that I didn't deserve to be hurt. And that hurt came out sideways. So
Right.
What am I going to do when I'm in that situation again? Not tamp down on the hurt that I'm feeling, but instead recognize this hurt is real. It's legitimate. I don't deserve it. And I'm going to find other ways to be in relationship with people because this thing is not working. This isn't the thing for me. I don't deserve to be treated like this.
Absolutely. And looking to the future when you do find yourself ready for love or relationships again, in addition to being able to walk away when the love is not to the level at which you deserve, reminding yourself that I think what I needed to hear coming out of that last relationship is that was a relationship of circumstances, not a relationship of my inherent value or capabilities. In a healthy relationship, I am a wonderful partner, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And say that to yourself, own that, right? Like that I'm capable of greatness when loved, supported, and big yourself up. And remember, in addition to that, not only do we all have needs and attachment styles and wounds that need tending and stuff like that, we also have agency. And I think that I just want to say to you that, like, you know what these triggers are. You know what these irrational thoughts are. You know that these thoughts of fear and anxiety about untrustworthiness are predominantly wounds from this past relationship, and you know that you don't want to carry them around with you. So I just want to urge you right now to remember, I have agency. I don't need to look at that tracking, or I don't need to check that socials. I'm going to bask in the uncertainty of this scenario right now. I'm going to just bask in the fact that no matter how much, you learned this lesson to the core of you. No matter how much you try to control someone, they will still hurt you. Mm-hmm. And that's not the depressing answer that I want you to take away from this letter, but it is a truth of life, right? That moving forward, you cannot control someone enough to stop them from hurting you. And that is the essence of vulnerability. That's the essence of connection, is knowing that it's kind of all up there in the universe, right? Mm-hmm. People can't be controlled. People are capable of hurting us. And also they're capable of great affection and joy and connection and growth and forgiveness and understanding. And you're going to have to open yourself up to that again. And the terrifying possibility that all of this could happen again. Mm-hmm. And yet you will know that next time you will act differently. Yep. And that's security, right? That's growth. That's healing. Healing isn't being without these toxic traits or without these toxic histories. Right. Healing is knowing that you have the opportunity to do things differently and executing it as such. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
that's great. Yeah. We love you, toxic man. I have a ton of faith in you, and I hope that resonates with you.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you writing and being willing to share about this experience and your fears of what's going to come forward. But Sierra and I have faith that you're going to find a way to be more authentic to who we know that you are, which is somebody who's capable of great love and great affection and great kindness to the people around him.
Absolutely. We love you so much. We hope this helps.
Thank you so much for writing. Our next letter comes from Questioning, but not at all, actually, whose pronouns are she, her, who's writing from the spectrum. Dear Sam and Sierra, first, I hope you are well and know how impactful this podcast is for so many, myself included. I listen to JBU every week and tell all of my friends, sibling, and even my boyfriend to listen too, because I know it will better their lives the way it has bettered mine. I could go on and on and on about how much I adore both of you, and I'm so thankful for the work you do. Seriously, thank you both. I am writing with many questions and also not really any, so this will more likely be of a humble musing letter with a few starter questions y'all can address specifically or not. Background, I'm a cisgender, 26-year-old female who is fully aware that sexuality, gender identity, etc. is on a spectrum and that there's no telling what the future can hold. But all this to say, I am straight. I know, kind of a bummer. I have an extremely great friend group.
It's not a bummer.
It's really not. I have an extremely great friend group full of amazing women who constantly encourage me, push me to be better, and love me fully and wholly as I am. One of my best friends, let's call her Jess, is lesbian, out and proud, and owns the fuck out of her identity. One of my other best friends, let's call her Kate, was in a horribly toxic, manipulative relationship with this absolute douchebag of a man when we met about 2 years ago. She ended that relationship, and after months of rediscovering herself and finding more and more joy in her life, she came out as bisexual and started dating her now girlfriend, Claire, who I adore and also has become a great friend of mine. Our friend group consists of many beautiful women, and for a while I was the only single straight girl in the group. When we went out, Jess, her roommate, and I were normally together, as everyone else would sometimes bring along their significant others. I often was hit on by women. I was always flattered, but was never interested, and always was really nice but honest that I didn't date women and didn't want to lead anyone on. I definitely will share a drunken peck on the lips with any of my close friends, but this is common for the whole friend group as we are just really lovey-dovey, affectionate people. It's not that deep. There was one evening we were out that has recently resurfaced to my mind. I was sitting at the bar with Claire and Kate, and they began asking me really strange questions as I was 3 to 4 drinks deep. At the time, I had a huge crush on some loser, and they began berating me. Why was I so sure I didn't want to date a woman? How can I say I don't like women if I won't ever go on a date with one? Why not just hook up with one of the girls who hits on me and see how it goes? Would a man ever understand the emotional needs of women? How can I still be attracted to men after being treated badly in the past by most guys I dated, etc.? I was almost in shock and didn't know what to really say or how to justify that while I know that men can be the worst, that's just who I want to be with in a romantic and sexual relationship. They even tried to get me to switch my Bumble to everyone just to see. At some point, Jess must have seen my face, that I was uncomfortable from across the bar, and she came over and asked me to go to the bathroom with her. I told her I didn't want to talk about what was going on then and just to focus on the evening, and we could talk later. We got coffee the next day, just the two of us. I explained what they were asking me, how uncomfortable it was, but I knew that it was coming from a place of Kate just being so happy and in love with her girlfriend after getting out of a dumpster fire relationship with a man. She is the epitome of fuck men, and I am trying to be understanding of all that, but it was super weird. I also told Jess that I felt a little like they were almost gaslighting me into admitting that I wasn't straight, even though I am. As if I don't know that dating men can be the worst. Jess agreed she wouldn't say anything, but was glad I confided in her. She assured me that my sexuality and who I want to be with is valid, and just like being gay isn't a choice, being straight really isn't either. She was honestly super pissed off, and I had to beg her to keep the situation between us, but she was furious they would behave that way and went as far as to say they disrespected my boundaries and took advantage of me being a little drunk. Fast forward, and I am now in a relationship with the most unbelievable man. He is kind, thoughtful, sexy, charming, in therapy, panty dropper, and makes me want to be a better version of myself. There is definitely a future, and I have truly never been so happy in a relationship while still fostering and encouraging my own independence too. It's gross how smitten I am. All of my friends, family, and even my dogs love him. Claire and Kate were initially a little rude to him whenever we are together. They made comments about how he can't be as great as I say he is simply because he's a man. My boyfriend doesn't let it bother him because he knows and understands the place it comes from, similar to the explanation I gave Jess, and he knows that we have a good true love and eventually they will recognize it. He is also a vocal ally for the LGBTQ+ community and women's rights, again, panty dropper. I have brought it up to them before, and they apologized and admitted that they also just miss me because I used to be a third wheel with them all the time. However, they still make comments here and there that they make me uncomfortable. For example, a week or so ago, I met them at a coffee shop where they had been mingling with the baristas, and when I got there, Kate goes, "This is my friend," inserts my name here. She's bisexual too, but she just won't admit it. I never laughed, and just nervous laughed and ordered a coffee. So like I said, not really sure I have any questions other than, was what my friends did okay? I had honestly pushed it out of my mind, but after the initial reactions to my boyfriend and making comments about my sexuality, I realized that I probably should have addressed it then, right? I love my boyfriend, and when I told him the story, he was deeply saddened. My friends would try to push me into something that I expressed was not my preference, and also that they encouraged me to just have sex with a woman before I decided I was straight. They once made a sarcastic comment that I likely wasn't orgasming every time I had sex since I was sleeping with a man. They often brag about their sex life and how bad sex with a woman is better than great sex with a man. Again, we know we got a good thing, so we just brush it off. But is there a way I can express how these comments are somewhat hurtful? The next time they introduce me as bisexual, do I say I'm not? I am a huge ally of the LGBTQ plus community, and as an ally, it feels icky that they want me to claim a sexuality that isn't authentic to my identity. Plus, I would never want to give a woman the wrong idea because I love, respect, and care about women. Duh. Anyway, any humble musings would be welcome. Love you both. Thank you for everything.
Thank you so much for writing, questioning, et cetera, et cetera. And hey, congrats on what sounds like a super great relationship.
Absolutely. With a man, no less. Can you believe?
With a man. Could you ever believe? Listen, I think Instagram and I don't know, what is it, Gen Z? Is that what's happening right now?
Great.
I don't know.
We're going to throw Gen Z under the bus now.
All right, and millennials and everyone. It seems like the world, how about that, has been like reclaiming their collective power by shitting on heterosexual people.
Yes, yes, I agree with that.
And you know what? Like, I am here for a percentage of that. I'm here for a joke here and there. I'm sure Sam and I have like trashed or like laughed at a joke like that or made one like that on the show. And also, I feel like if our goal as a society is to liberate everyone to be their most authentic selves, then we have to stop assuming that other people's most authentic selves looks anything like us,
For sure.
I think we make sense of the world by seeing it through our own lenses and circumstances and values and parameters that have worked for us or been pleasurable for us, right? And so I get it. I totally get it. And also as somebody who's queer, like, man, I probably would be lying if I said I hadn't made a joke like that in the last 20 years. You know what I mean? Unfortunately,
sure. Yes,
this episode is just embarrassing content that Sierra has done historically.
I'm with you on that one. I've definitely made those jokes before, for sure.
Yeah. And I know on this show, as the letter writer said, that I have said sentiments like, and I believe this, that we could meet someone, we could go about our lives one way for 60 years and then meet somebody who changes our whole worldview, that
Absolutely.
Our sexuality can change upon experience. It can change when we meet somebody new or you could be 100% heterosexual and meet someone that changes that percentage just one point,
Sure.
And also, I feel like the queer community does this thing where we delegitimize other people's experiences and desires because, I don't know, maybe that's a response to our desires being delegitimized for eons.
Mm-hmm. There's a difference between recognizing that like homophobia and like heteronormativity like benefits straight people while also recognizing that like not all straight people experience those things in the same way. And so there are legitimately out there, including, I believe you, questioning, but not really, right, that are like, listen, this isn't because I don't know who I am. I have done a lot of work to understand my sexuality, and this is it. And I recognize that like there's a whole spectrum of experience that people can have. And my point on the spectrum is this one. And I also see that like everyone else's point on the spectrum is also super valid, and I will fight for them and I support them and all of those good things, even as we know that there are people who are straight who are like really, really shitty people. There's also a lot of queer people who are pretty shitty too, right? And who are pretty heteronormative in the way that they operate and are pretty homophobic and transphobic in the things that they do. So it's not that all straight people are somehow secretly homophobes or that like all queer people are somehow immediately enlightened to the realities of sexism, homophobia, transphobia, all of those different things. And so it's like, we have to be able to separate the system of oppression from the people who are participating in it and recognize that like questioning seems to be doing the work. And so like, let's let her identify however she wants to identify. And I'm saying that not to you questioning, but I'm saying that sort of extensive or as an extension to Kate, because I think that their behavior in this is really challenging and sort of problematic. And I totally understand it, as it seems like you do. But I also think it's pretty unacceptable for them to not believe you when you say that you have a particular identity and are attracted to particular people. And so I think it's really valid for you to say that to them and to tell them, like, I understand that your experience was this. That is not my experience, right? I'm really glad that you discovered for yourself that you are bisexual. I think that's wonderful. And I'm glad that you have that moment of liberation and understanding. That is not my journey. I am straight and will continue to be straight until things change. But like, I need you to stop doing this thing that you're doing because it's hurtful to me. Right. And I, as a queer person, am frustrated with the way that Kate is approaching this situation, because I think it's frustrating whenever anyone's sexual identity is being questioned, even though they're saying it over and over again that is doing it, especially if, like you are practicing really respectful ways of being around queer people, right? Like when women hit on you, you're not saying like, oh, I don't know, maybe I am. You're saying, hey, I'm not interested. I'm really flattered. I think you're really great. I'm just not into women, right? Like, perfect answer. Like, thank you. That's great. There's no like, oh, the woman asked me out. Like, what was I? Right? It's just like, no, thank you. I'm flattered. And I wish I could reciprocate, but honestly, I can't. So like, thank you, but I'm not going to lead you on. If men in my life handled being hit on by men in that way, like, I just feel like the world would be such a better place. So like, thank you for doing that. And I wish that Kate were giving you more credit in the way that you're handling the situation, because I think you're handling it really well.
I think the friend is being disappointing as well. I don't know where this is coming from, but it's, if it's been it's a repeated refrain, like in homophobic dialogue, to say like, oh, well, you just haven't had sex with the right man, or like if somebody ever came to one of your queer friends and said like, oh, you're queer because you haven't experienced the right dick yet, it is so problematic. And that's essentially what they're saying. I want to encourage you to talk to your friend, and you can recognize that this is coming from a jovial place of this person like celebrating their own experience and, I don't know, making jokes. Like we can often drift into some toxic jokes, right, within our friend groups. And I know we're all capable of that. And also, you can say, this is really wearing on me and it's affecting our friendship. I understand that you're making these jokes. I understand where they're coming from, but at their core is this toxic thing that's delegitimizing me, right? Yeah. And I would never delegitimize you and your experience. If you and so break up and you go magically meet somebody who does not identify as a woman, I promise I will not hold this over your head. I think that your friend is definitely being unreasonable, and you have every right to bring this to them. I hope that you do. Mm-hmm. I also want to say that like this sort of thinking in queer communities is what like leads to biphobia, I think, is the idea that like that there is, I don't know, a hierarchy to queerness, right? And that queer folks who are in hetero-presenting relationships or in heterosexual relationships are obviously just like either just being tourists or like not are settling for their male partners or their female partners or their non-binary partners or whatever. I feel like it is what contributes to this idea that there's a right and wrong way to be queer, that there's a right and wrong way to be a human in a body with desire, or no desire. I honestly, like, I'm stumbling to find the words only because, like, I think I was Kate, right? Like you said you were too, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were these people. And I think maybe it's a part of, maybe it's in response to finding yourself and feeling so good in it and feeling like intoxicated by the excitement of the queer community. I've been there. I fucking love my queer community. I love my queer friends. I love the feeling that I get of being authentically me. You know, it's like this great feeling of safety. And also, it's so obvious that feeling is being taken to a toxic place where it's defeating its purpose, right? To me, a queer community isn't about necessarily their queerness. Like, I don't care who my fucking friends sleep with. Like, if you, Sam, my love, came to me and said, like, all of a sudden, I met this woman and I love her and I want to be with her and I'm going to leave my husband, you know, I would be like, okay, queer friend, go find yourself, be your most authentic self. And that has very little to do with who we sleep with, who we are desirous of. It has to do with the pillars of our friendships, you know, that we want our friendships, we want our friends to be more and more authentically themselves. So it is, just to echo what we've already said, it's disappointing that your friend is doing this and you have every right to say, I don't appreciate this and I'd like to rewrite this narrative in our friendship. And if you don't respect that, then I need to take space from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think I can understand too, given that they're newly out as well, that like that experience of liberation is so intoxicating that it can be everyone should experience this, right? Right. And not recognizing.
I was that person.
Oh, for sure. And not recognizing like, yeah, that experience of liberation might look like just reminding people that you're straight, right? Or like being affirmed in your straightness. And like that is a-okay. And like I said, I really appreciate the way that you're handling your participation in queer spaces too. And I think that it's important for us to sort of recognize that like there is space for straight people in the world of supporting queer people, right? And that like and part of that means that as queer people, we have to create space for the fact that like some people are going to identify as straight, right? It's not that they're just naive. It's not that they're unenlightened.
Especially if they're there right. They're there in the right mode, you know.
And participating, I think, in the way that you're participating, questioning, which is to like know where your space is and know where your role is and to stay in a place that's respectful of other people in that. And like, I just think that that's great. So I think that this is definitely something that you can talk to Kate about. And I'm sorry that they're doing this to you, and I also recognize that they are doing this probably from a place of positivity, a place of excitement, a place of enthusiasm about their own experience, but their experience isn't yours. And it's okay for you to remind them of that.
Absolutely. All right, my darling, we hope that this helps.
Thank you so much for writing.
We love you. Our next letter comes to us from Anonymous, whose pronouns are they, them, who's writing to us from the void. Dear Just Break Up, thank you so much for such a wholesome podcast. It is so lovely to have you with me in my little ears as I try to navigate this queer and scary landscape that is the dating world. That was like one of my favorite opening sentences. I always value your advice, guidance, and perspective. Before I go on with my letter, I just want to put out a gentle trigger warning for self-harm and eating disorders so that whoever is reading this or listening to this can choose to save it for another day or skip it altogether. So, when I was a teenager, from around 12 to 17, I suffered from a pretty bad eating disorder. I didn't go to school for all those years and spent most of my time in and out of a variety of hospitals. During that period, I also self-harmed whenever I, according to my illness, ate too much. It was a very difficult and isolating time of my life. I had no friends, studied from home, and kept moving from one institution to the next. It has been about 10 years since I was sick, and I have a life I had never imagined was ever possible for when I was ill. I finished my degree at a prestigious university, have a good job, great friends, and a safe living situation. But, and this is why I'm writing to you, I struggle greatly with intimacy. When I meet someone I am interested in, I dread being intimate with the person because of the scars I have on my thighs. I never self-harmed in a visible place, so people can't usually see my scars. Having my scars seen by someone else, someone I'm interested in, makes me feel like I'm a huge red flag. No matter how much I have recovered or how well I'm doing, these scars follow me and reveal a past that I don't always feel ready to disclose to a person I am dating. Also, I just don't feel my sickness history is something that is super relevant to my current life. I wouldn't mind talking about it when we know each other better. It just feels like a lot to let someone in on. I just don't really have a choice about disclosing it if, for instance, I want to sleep with someone on a third date. As we get steamy with one another and we take off our clothes, they will instantly, quote, know that part of me when they see my thighs, and I feel it paints a picture of me I don't quite feel comfortable with. This has resulted in me fulfilling my need for intimacy with strangers and one-night stands mostly, and usually ending things with people that I'm actually interested in after a couple dates because I'm afraid of the intimacy part. I did have one long-term partner of 5 years ago, but no one since. It sucks and is not the way I want to have relationships with people. The thing is, I just don't know how to deal with these scars and the stigma that follows with being a person who has to carry them for literally forever. And while I struggle with it in intimate relationships, I would also say that is something I struggle with my friends. Sorry, I thought I was going to continue into a list. And while I struggle with it in intimate relationships, I would also say that it is something I struggle with my friends. While some know my past with an eating disorder, only one has ever seen my self-harm scars and knows about that part as well. I never swim or wear short shorts. Most of the time, I don't even notice all the tiny ways I have adjusted my life around my thighs. It is inconvenient. I miss out on beach trips, but mostly it does not impair my life too much. Yet, when it comes to dating, it has become a hindrance to building long, loving relationships, and I want to change that. And so my question is, how should I address my scars in intimate dating situations? Should I even bring it up with people I'm dating after we've been together? Should I just not say anything? Should I wait until they ask? Would love to hear some tips from your dating savvy brains. XOXOA. A, thank you so much for writing and for trusting us with this letter, with your history, and with this tender question. I texted a friend of mine to get their permission to share a little bit of our friendship with them, and she consented. So I want to tell you a little story about my friend. Let's call her Janet. Janet and I used to work together at a restaurant, and I love Janet. Janet has a great fuck you attitude. And she's funny, and we bonded over a ton of things. But Janet has six visible, I think six, I don't know, big scars on her arm. And basically, the story of Janet that I wanted to tell you is just that when I met her, I saw those scars, and I never asked her about them. I don't know the story, even though we've talked about those scars specifically in the past. But I actually felt instantly kindred with Janet. And I felt like her and I had something in common. And even if we didn't have anything in common in terms of our stories or histories of self-harm, that, she would be somebody who wouldn't be afraid of my past. She would be somebody who could empathize, that that she was a safe space for me. And to this day, I don't know the whole story of how and when she got them. I know parts of her story, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that your people are out there and they don't care. In
Mhm.
fact, they might even appreciate your story. They're interested in your story and they won't judge you. They probably have a story of their own, whether or not they have the physical scars to match it. I know that it is a deeply, deeply frustrating thing to sort of non-consensually have your past out on your skin,
Mm.
right? To be forced to retell your story in a way that doesn't match your present life. My friend Janet, in talking about this before we recorded this episode, shared a similar sentiment that like she feels like they reveal a part of her to people that doesn't feel accurate to the person she is now.
Mm.
And it made me think about how we all, like, the metaphor of scars is kind of cliche, but we all have scars. We all have a history that follows us around, or one that we're not ashamed, one that we're ashamed of, or one that we've healed from, one that we feel like we've recovered from. We all have a past that could never picture the present we have right now. But not all of us are forced to disclose that in such an intimate way as a scar on our body. So those feelings of frustration are really real. But if you hear anything from this episode, I just want you to know that the people who meet you, I think most of them will be able to receive your whole story, whether or not you're enthusiastic about sharing it with them. And they're going to have a story to share as well. That might be like a little bit too much of a glass half full response, but I just so deeply believe in it, especially because I met Janet and I was drawn to her because of this. It made me feel safe with her, even though we never spoke about it, even though I don't know the circumstances of it. To this day, we still know that we share this history, we have this past, and I don't know, she was safe to me, and I think that I want to extend that to you in your future intimacy, that whatever made you feel like you were fucked up in the past wanted to isolate you, but I'm trying to tell you, like, it's what's fucked up about us that connects us, right? It's our mistakes and our wounds and our trauma and our fears that are more universal than like our perfect pasts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reality is that many of us probably know people who have self-harmed, right? Because it is not uncommon for folks to be doing that type of behavior. And so you might be surprised at how understanding people would be about it because they've had loved ones or friends who have done something similar. And I just, like, all this to say, I want to recognize that there is stigma around mental illness. There's stigma around eating disorders. There's a lot of stigma around self-harm and people who have self-harmed. So, like, I don't want to pretend like we're in this, like, lovey-dovey world where, like, no one's going to be weird about it. Because, like, yeah, people are going to be weird about it because we are really bad at handling or understanding things that are outside of our own experiences. But I do want to create the space for the idea that, like, there's nothing in this to be ashamed of, because this is a part of who you are and your experience of the world. And that there are a lot of people out there who are probably struggling with similar feelings around their own scars of self-harm, because there are people out there who have done this. And so you're not the most fucked up person in the world, right? Like, you're not the person who is somehow dealing with this alone. Like, there's a lot of people who are probably listening to this who are saying, like, yeah, I've got some of those scars too, and I also feel a particular type of way about them. So if you decide that you never want to show anyone your scars, that's fine with me, right? Like, you get to decide what you want to do with this part of you that is, like, authentic to your own experience. And what I'll say is that I think that there is something deeply vulnerable and open about wearing those scars with an understanding that there's nothing shameful about them, right? That there's nothing that you did wrong in enacting them, right? Like, obviously self-harm is not a super healthy way for us to deal with our mental health stuff. But you're not like bad because you did that. And the fact that you have come a long way from that position and that you are dealing with your eating disorder and dealing with the ramifications of the pain that you were in when you inflicted that harm on yourself speaks to what Sierra was talking about, speaks to like an authenticity of your experience, right? Your ability to overcome this thing. And if you were able to work through those things, it's also possible for you to work through this thing, right? This sort of feeling about the scars that you have. It's not going to be easy for sure. Like, I don't have like a list, like a thing you can just check off and it'll be like, cool, now I'm not thinking about it anymore. But I do think that there is a reservoir in you to be able to engage in this level of intimacy with folks and be able to share this part of you. And my hope is that there are folks out there that are going to be understanding, interested, compassionate about the experiences that you've been through. And we'll see those scars as being part of you and part of somebody who they really like or that they really love.
Yeah. I know that it's frustrating to not be able to choose how and when to disclose that. I think that that's totally relatably frustrating. And also I want to say something to you that I wish I heard when I was younger is that, like, I'm not afraid of your messiness. I'm not afraid of your history or your pain or your mistakes. I'm not afraid of your scars. In fact, I'm deeply curious and compassionate. And when I say I want to know you, I want to know all of you. I don't want to just know your niceties. I don't want to just know, who you are in a long sleeve shirt and long pants, right? I want to know all of you. And I know that that's what intimacy is. I know that's what's terrifying about all of this. And like Sam said, I don't want to sugarcoat it and say like these stigmas aren't out there. But in my path, as somebody who does have a history of self-harming, who felt like I could not consensually disclose parts about myself, especially because I fucking had a writing career that was like taking off at the same time that I was like healing myself. And so like, I wasn't going to share this, but like my writing career really started when I was really healing from a lot of self-harming behaviors. And one of my most popular poems on fucking YouTube was all about self-harming. And then people would like ask me on dates, like, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm a fucking professional poet, but don't fucking Google me, anyway, this is just to say back then I felt, I felt like it would tell a story about me that I didn't necessarily want told, just like you said, my dear Anonymous. And honestly, like, fuck that. Like, I want to know that story. I don't mean this with like bells and whistles and like everything's like peachy and positive, but like, I don't want to date somebody who doesn't know themselves like it sounds like you know yourself. Yeah. And when I am friends with people and when I'm in partnership with them, like, I want to know all of them and I want to know what made them, like what brought them from the hardest day of their life to now. I want to know what their toxic traits are, who they are on their worst fucking days and what they're doing to not be that person anymore. Like, I'm not interested in having a perfect partner. I'm interested in a person who is willing to look and know at themselves, So, yeah, I could tell you all the right, or no, I could tell you ways to timelines as to when you should tell people about this history or like, tell it to them on the third date or explain it in the Tinder message or whatever. But really, I just want you to know that if they exhibit behaviors that stem from mental health stigmas, then they are not the person for you because they are not curious and they are not compassionate and they are not honoring the complexity of their own story and they're not capable of honoring yours,
Yep. And it's not something that you need to apologize for or be ashamed of or like tell people, hey, just so you know, this is going to happen, right? Like your scars are a part of your body and there's no reason I feel that you need to like explain why your body looks the way that it does because your body is exactly the way that it is. And I think that if folks have questions, great. Like feel free to answer those questions in whatever way feels right for you. But I don't know that I don't think that your scars are something that needs to be explained before people can see them, right? Like I think that it is something that isn't disgusting or awful, right? It doesn't need to be like people don't need to be prepared for it because there are so many different types of bodies in this world and so many of those bodies carry scars like this that people should be able to encounter them and handle them in ways that is understanding that like we all have bodies and we all have different scars that come with those bodies. And so I don't feel like you need to tell people up front because I don't think you need to make a big deal out of it. That said, if you want to, I'm also on board with that, right? But I think that this impulse that your experience of like, I need to prepare people, I need to explain this so that they're not freaked out or they don't know what they are. I don't think that is something that needs to happen because your body doesn't need to be apologized for. These scars don't need to be apologized for or explained away. They are just part of you. And people, the people in your life that you want to expose yourself to in that way will reveal a lot about themselves based on how they handle that exposure to the body that you're in.
Yeah. And on that note too, I think in the past my anxiety has told me to accommodate people's experiences of me, right? To say, hey, just a heads up, I have these scars, or hey, just a heads up, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not sure I could stop doing that, to be totally honest. Like I'm trying to sit in my body right now and be like, if I was about to like get naked with somebody totally new, I fucking warn people that I have tattoos, like before I take my clothes off, I'm like, I'm covered in tattoos. You might not know that. I know it's weird, right? It's such a weird thing that I do. And also I think you can do that in a way that is radically accepting of yourself, right?
Sure.
Hey, we're making out. Just so you know, I've got these scars here. We can talk about them later. Like they're from a long time ago. I don't want to talk about them right now. Or, like there's a way for you to say that from a place of security and not a place of apology. Yeah. While I agree, and also I agree with what Sam said. Like, I don't feel like there's an offering that you have to give in order to make your body palatable to these people, right? Like, I think that you can decide when and how you want to talk about them. And also you could just say like, I have these scars on my body. They're from a long time ago. We can talk about them later if you want. But first, like, let's make out,
Yeah.
They can be from a place of security.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. I love you, my darling letter writer, Anonymous. I love your journey and I'm interested in it. And I know that there are other people out there who are going to meet you with the same respect and interest. Yeah. I know intimacy is really scary. But like the secret is it's scary for everybody, whether or not they've got something that they feel like they need to hide. Lean in, baby cakes. We love you.
Absolutely.
We love you so fucking much.
Thank you so much for writing.
We hope this helps. All right. This brings us to the blind date segment of this episode. Every show we like to shout out something that we love that we can set you up with. And this week we are sending you home with
a book called Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell. I've alluded in the past few episodes to the fact that I'm reading a book about cults. And this is the book that I've been reading. It is a really great book. It is about not just cults in general, but also about the way that cults use language to sort of love bond people, to convince them to do things, to in-group and out-group. And what's interesting about it is that she talks about the ways in which lots of different places use what she calls cultish language to help sort of bring people together. But it's about sort of how that language is used to cause good or harm. So she talks about like Soul Cycle as being a place that like uses a lot of cultish language. And is it like causing active harm? Maybe. That's for us to decide. But then also like Jonestown, right? And the cultish language that sort of drove people to participate in that cult. And it's interesting to listen to because it's interesting to hear the different ways in which we all use cultish language. I mean, I'm thinking like about the podcast too, like the ways in which we use shorthand or we refer back to things over and over again, or we use what are called thought-terminating cliches, which are like things that you can't really argue with because they're like believed to be true, but they might not be, like, oh, well, that's just the way it is, or oh, sometimes that's the way the cookie crumbles, right? Where it's like, okay, well, how am I supposed to actually argue with that? But it terminates any sort of conversation. But it's very good. It's super interesting. There's a lot of different through lines. And what I love and appreciate about it is that it feels like she comes at it from a very non-judgmental way. So it treats the people who are engaged in cults or cultish-like things with a lot of care and grace, and sort of recognizes the ways in which language can often actually prevent us from critical thinking in ways that can keep us in places that may not be helpful or safe for us. So very interesting, very good, very well written. Again, that's Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell.
Sweet.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. You can like us on Facebook and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at JustBreakUpPod.
You can slide into our DMs, send us your favorite relationship memes, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts, and consider supporting us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod. This literally keeps the mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need two random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of David Media, original music, recording, editing, producing, all magical things by our good friend Spencer Wirth-Davis, a.k.a. Big Cats. Make sure to check out his music on Spotify and his most recent podcast, Finding Quantum Quest. And remember, the worst part of you, the worst behavior you can think of, the most toxic thing you have ever done, isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be curious about. Your pain, your needs, your processing skills at that time were doing the best that they could. And we can find out more about ourselves if we question the things that we are ashamed of, if we question the things that we regret, and we greet those things with love, compassion, and curiosity. And if all else fails,
Just break up.